Okay, thank you very much for invitation to this Congress, and I'm very happy to be here because it would be interesting also to talk about the barriers. You were talking before about the barriers of concrete applying this kind of instruments in clinical trials, and as you will see now, I encountered even the barriers also in letting this application I'm talking about approved by the ethics committee. So this is a very challenge that we will be encountering in the application of wearable or all other instruments in clinical practice. I'm a biostatistician. For me, this is a very challenge to work on this kind of instruments because I'm used to work with data. So this is the first time for me to work with something that is directly related to the patients. This is my disclosure. I don't have actual conflicts of interest. And I will talk about this eye consent instrument that was developed within a European project of ours. And this project is called DART, Building Data-Rich Clinical Trials. And the project was dedicated to deliver novel methods for design and the implementation of new methods for clinical trials in oncology. And in particular, this was centered on this phase 2 trial, basket-to-basket, evaluating targeted agents in molecular selected patients with advanced solid tumors. And in particular, me and our groups from Milan, Fondazione IRCCS, Istituto, Nazionale dei Tumori, also Mario Negri Institute and Data River, that was the company developing this web app. We were working on 2 work packages, in particular devoted to develop patient-oriented electronic tools. And in particular, these were 3 tools. iEnter, that is a website. iConsent, that is an application to elicit the informed consent. And iParticipate, that is another application that is also with which the patients can manage the appointments, also the documentation of the trial. And the general aim was promoting patient information, the recruitment involvement, and facilitating also the participation of the patients to the BOP trial. In particular, iEnter, as I said before, is an informative website addressed to potential also participating patients and also to their caregivers and advocates and the public. iConsent is a web app restricted to patients, both potential and actual BOP trial participants, that would allow to elicit the informed consent. And the Participate was in a web app also allowing remote access to trial visits, also manage calendar, also with which the patients can messaging with clinicians and can exchange also the documentations. iEnter is an entry point for the 2 other apps, iConsent and iParticipate. And as you can see here, we developed some contents that can be useful for the patients to understand which are the aims of the BOP trials. We also reported the results, general results of the BOP trial itself. We have a glossary in order to make the patients understand some concept related to the trials. And we developed also extensive texts explain, for instance, the meaning of genes and mutations, and with which And we have also some videos, explicative videos, and that were judged more useful for the patients to understand what is the precision medicine, what implied the informed consent process, what are the clinical trials, and in particular, what is the basket-to-basket, the BOB trial. Why we in our group, we talked about these three web apps to be interconnected. It's because we think that the informed consent is a process. It's not related just to the sign of the consent, but it's important to think about all the decisional steps of the process. That starts with the first contact with the patient that is during the outpatient visit, and then the clinicians inform the patients about the clinical trial, its risks and benefits, and during this phase, the patients can ask questions to the clinicians or other information, and hence there is the decisional phase. The very last step is to sign the informed consent form. And this is usually made face-to-face, but this kind of web app could allow the patients to be informed, for instance, by means of a website like iEnter, to be informed about the contents of the trials, and also to visualize at home all the leaflets related to the trial by means of iConsent. Then they can at home easily read everything that is related to the trial comfortably at home, and at the end they could sign by means of iConsent remotely. They could sign their consent. Just to give you an overview of the web app, this was implemented both for web and mobile access. And actually, it is important to note that actually this app is not implemented in the BOB trial because firstly, it has to be pilot on real patients, and most importantly, to apply it in practice, the BOB trial should be amended. Even an amendment is requested just to implement the use of a website like iEnter, giving information to the patients. It is necessary to present an amendment. And this is the first barrier I would talk about, because we could think about a website like something that is not an intervention for the patients. It's just an informative. There are just information the patients can read, the patient can comment, but it is considered like modifying the procedures of the trial. So it is necessary to present an amendment even for the use on a website, and also for the use of a web application like iConsent to sign remotely the consent. Current characteristics of this web app are related to the informed consent elicitation, including also amendment of the protocol or revocation, both for the ongoing BOB trial or most importantly for future ancillary studies. The patients can access, as I said before, to all consent documentation, the leaflet, and to previously signed forms. And the actual version is implementing the hybrid electronic signature. That means that the patient sign for the trial paper and pencil. They can scan this form and upload it to iConsent. And this is before, when we delivered the web app in 2023. At the time, we, as far as we knew, GCP and DMA regulation were not allowing to sign remotely the consent. So this was not thought to be implemented directly in the BOB trial at that time. I consent also allows to messaging patients to message, like using the email directly to the oncologist, and by this app the patients can, as I said before, can enter and visualizing additional information through direct hyperlink to iEnter. And this is a short video about the user, but it's not. I just want you to know that there are two interfaces of iConsent, one for clinicians and one for the patients. The clinicians, of course, have to initialize the patients to the web app because it's needed a username and the password to enter the web application. So the clinician is that are recruiting each patient have to firstly create the patients into the application, and then the clinician assign the consent to the patients into the app. The patients can visualize all the leaflets, and the clinician assign each particular leaflet to each patient, so the patient can visualize the leaflet, and then he has to sign into the app. Then the clinician has to countersign the consent, because it is necessary to countersign because the consent should be valid. Then, also using the app, the consent can be withdrawn when the patient is not decided to go out of the trial. And we have also the patient mode that is more limited because the patients cannot cancel the consent. When the consent is created by the clinician, the patient cannot cancel the record from the app. And this is important because the consent can be revoked, but the app has this is to be registered by the app, so nothing can be cancelled. And we performed a pilot study of iConsent because, as I said before the app can be effectively used into the trial, we wanted to know the patient experience, and we wanted to know, it's important to have an insight about the patient use of the web app, and also the use of iEnter. So we wrote a protocol to test the field usability and collect the patient's suggestion for improvement of the 3 web apps. But notice that in that version, electronic signature was not yet included into the app. The pilot study was taught to recruit the patients from the BOP trial, and the participating center were just 3. These 3 centers, of course, Fondazione, IRCCS, Istituto, Nazionale dei Tumori, also Spain and Netherlands. But as far as I know, Spain is starting recruitment of patients, but the Netherlands has problems with the IT committee because they don't want to accept this kind of study. Because it is considered interventional. We in Italy recruited 10 patients, 5 evaluating just iEnter, and other 5 evaluating iConsent and iParticipate. The instrument for evaluation was this system usability scale that has 10 items. And we encountered some difficulties in patients' recruitment because the patients were unwilling to participate, but some patients signed the consent to the pilot trial participation, but soon after passed away because unfortunately the Bob trial patients are too frail. And at the end, in Milan, we have recruited 5 patients for eye consent evaluation, and I presented the results on 3 patients because the other 2 don't have still the questionnaires. And we identified some areas of improvement of the web app. For instance, as far as usability and complexity are concerned, we had mixed feedbacks. The patients thought that the web app is easy to use and they are comfortable in using it, but there are some difficulties in using some functionalities. As regard integration between the web app, there are some inconsistencies noted by the patients, and we have to, of course, improve these inconsistencies. And accessibility of information, the patients think that it's easy to access information by given by iEnter. I mean, text and videos shown in the web site. And as compared to other applications, similar application, the patients, one patient thought that the eye consent is similar to other applications, but it is considered positive, the possibility to reduce paper use by using this kind of instruments. And here I come with the barriers, because this is one the possible use and practice in the practice of clinical trials of this kind of app has encountered some barriers, firstly by the ethics committee. In January, we met the GCP team at the Italian medicine agency, AIFA, because we wanted to ask why, or at least if it's possible to apply in practice eye consent in the clinical trials, and we wanted to have their opinion. And in particular, we asked if GCP ask explicitly for paper and pencil informed consent signature, or we could use some electronic instruments. The IFA team told us that actually GCP is neutral from a technological point of view. They don't ask explicitly for any particular kind of instrument, but what they request is to apply a valid signature that certify the co-presence of, at the same time, of the doctor and the patients. GCP don't ask to establish, don't establish which kind of electronic signature is acceptable, and nor they clearly make explicit what co-presence means. And going to the other regulatory agency, that is EMA, we know that were issued some recommendation papers on the centralized elements in clinical trials in 2022, and also we have a guideline on computerized systems and electronic data in clinical trials in 2023. These guidelines explicitly mentioned that the electronic signature can replace the paper and pencil signature in clinical trials. But the recommendation is to use the qualified electronic signature for the informed consent. And these guidelines described also the functionalities of the qualified electronic signature with reference to electronic identification, authentication, and signature ADAPS regulation that is acknowledged also in Italy. And EMA recommends that if the informed consent process is done entirely virtually, it should be in real time with both parties communicating via audio and video. And we can implement in iConsent this kind of functionality of virtual meeting that could integrate the electronic signature to make complete the informed consent process. Finally, the advice from the IFA GCP team is that actually the full electronic informed consent process is acceptable by regulatory authorities such as IFA, but it is mandatory to use the qualified electronic signature. And that is a signature produced through qualified trust services providers. And the main characteristic of this signature is that it is valid as the paper and pencil signature. And using qualified trust services provider, this signature is recognized in all the EU member states. And the IFA team also recommended us to share this information with our ethics committee in order to make them approve this kind of instrument to be used in the clinical trials. So after that meeting, we planned a further study, pilot study, this time to pilot the remote electronic signature on iConsent. And we planned to apply this signature on 2 clinical trials, not on Bob trial, because of the problems I told you before, the frailty of the patients. So we are still recruiting patients in Spain, and we think that the first pilot could be finished at the end of this the next year. But the second pilot should be performed just in Italy and should recruit for 20 patients in total, 10 from a clinical trial and other 10 from another clinical trial that are ongoing in Italy. And we presented this protocol to our ethics committee, and it was refused the first time because the study is considered interventional. So it is a very high barrier that we encountered, because we cannot understand why the first pilot study protocol was approved, but this time it was not approved just perhaps before there is this particular problem of the remote electronic signature. So, which is the future of iConsent, or at least of some apps like iConsent? We actually don't know, because we hope that the patients could be able to use such a kind of instruments to sign the informed consent, because it is useful for particular clinical trial types, such as those conducted remotely or virtually. I think about decentralized clinical trials or telemedicine studies, or in multinational clinical trials, because this kind of instrument can facilitate the collection of the consent data across geographic location, and also accommodate multiple language and cultural adaptations. And finally, this kind of web app can be useful also after enrollment for consenting the secondary use of clinical and biological collected data, for elicitate the consent in case of protocol amendments, and also to review and update the consent, reconsent of study procedure, or withdrawal the consent. So we hope that in the future we could actually and effectively implement the iConsent in practice, also not just in the Bob trial, but also in others trials. Okay, thank you.